I'm very sorry I can't be with you today, but a cousin to whom I was very close, I come from Galloway. I was born in Glasgow, but come from Galloway, and I've got many cousins who were farmers there, and one of them died, and his funeral is on Tuesday. So I'm very sorry I can't be with you, but I'm going to offer some knowledge and support for your excellent activity partnership. Now, the way I'm going to do this is, firstly, to talk to you as though you were a bridge club in Bedford, or a mosque in Luton, or a bowls club in somewhere in the county, or a church or WI group, or indeed your parents or grandparents. And secondly, I'm going to speak about the implications for health and social care in the future. Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to tell you the facts of life 2.0. The birds and the bees 2.0. You see, there is something called the aging process. And there are only two phases in life: a phase of growth and development, a turning point, and then it's downhill all the way. But don't get too anxious, because there's something we can do about that rate of decline. Now, aging is not a cause of major problems until the late 90s. But we have to understand it. Aging reduces your maximum level of ability, the maximum heart rate, for example, and reduces resilience, your ability to respond, either to a trip or a stumble or a change in environmental temperature or lockdown. And we're now seeing a huge impact of lockdown and a decline in healthy life expectancy for the first time really in my career. So that's aging, a normal biological process. And here's the impact of lockdown. Now, young people were affected psychologically, but physically they soon overcame the problem of inactivity. But for many people in their 70s, 80s and 90s, it had a huge impact, which is still with us. Loss of conditioning, loss of fitness, as well as mental problems. So, aging is usually not a problem until the late 90s, but it does affect your resilience, so we need to think about it. There are three other processes that affect us as we live longer, and the first of these is loss of fitness. And it starts about the turning point, often when we get our first car. And a fitness gap opens up between the best possible rate of decline and the actual rate of decline. Now, what is fitness? Well, the two aspects of fitness. One is the maximum level of ability, and the second is the ability to recover from exercise. And that, of course, is resilience. So here's two people. The person who is fit. If I ask you all to climb 4 flights of stairs, the person who is fitter, their pulse doesn't go up and comes down much more quickly. So loss of fit, maximum ability and resilience, that's the same as aging, which is why the medical profession has confused these two things until very recently. But we now know that many of the problems that affect us are loss of fitness, not due to lifestyle, but the modern environment. We are genetically not developed to an environment in which we sit all the time with calories everywhere we look. The good news is that no matter how old you are, you can close the fitness gap. Now, the second process that affects other than aging is disease. And disease gets more common the longer we live, and I've got 4 long-term conditions and take 6 pills a day, and that's again due to our environment. We're genetically not suited to the modern environment. And diseases like type 2 diabetes and heart disease are mismatched diseases, a mismatch between our genes and the environment. Now, what you see here is that after disease comes on, the fitness gap gets wider faster. And it may mean that we drop below what I call the line, below which you can't get to the toilet in time. That's partly because of the disease, but it's also because other people keep doing things for you. We need to think in a different way, not just NHS rehabilitation. We need to think about enabling people to do things for themselves. The good news is that no matter your age, no matter how many long-term conditions you've got, we can close the fitness gap. Now, the third factor that affects us, as well as loss of fitness and disease, is social factors. Ageism affects everyone, and deprivation affects far too many people. It's a very important factor. So, to summarise, here are the 4 factors that affect us as we live longer, and here's what we can do. There's very strong evidence about the benefits of doing these things. So, ladies and gentlemen, what's my message? Well, carry on with the Mediterranean diet and the things you're doing. If you're still smoking, give it another shot. But the core message is every year get even more fit. Do even more every year. And every diagnosis, do even more, not less. Do even more for other people and strengthen your sense of purpose. The Queen had a strong sense of purpose. And remember, you can reduce your risk of dementia. There are 3 things to do. 1, keep the brain tissue healthy, sleep well, manage stress. Physical activity is directly beneficial. Secondly, keep the blood supply flowing to the brain, just like the heart, exactly the same risk factors. And then thirdly, and very interestingly, these social factors, which of course are affected by deafness and isolation, purpose, positivity. And here was a very interesting article in the Journal of the American Medical Association. First article in 2020 shows its importance. And this man's a very distinguished scientist, but he wasn't writing about some chemical. Look at the subtitle. Purpose, engagement, positivity. Prescription for healthy longevity. Purpose. And there, of course, was a wonderful example. Okay, well, that's the presentation. And what we'd like to do is to train hundreds of people in your population to be able to give that talk. It's quite simple. We have a learning program for professionals and volunteers, and that'd be much broader than just the NHS. It includes, say, volunteers from Age UK. So we're very keen for spreading this message and a cultural revolution. So what we're developing is an integrated system of care. And here are the objectives of this integrated care system. And as you can see, there's a wide range of different objectives. Some of them are fairly conventional: preventive medicine, preventing falls, disability, frailty, dementia. Others are more subtle. How do we enable people to strengthen their sense of purpose? And how do we support the relatives better? And then that interesting one at the bottom of the list, not in terms of bottom in importance, but dying well as living well. And that should probably be discussed in every bowls club and bridge club and mosque and church at least once a year. This is the century of the system and the network. And these are the objectives. Now, there are 2 main outcomes. The first of these is to compress morbidity at the end of life. That's what people are really worried about. It's not, people don't want to live to 110 or 118, but it's living well as long as possible. But we do have to remember the impact of deprivation. And the number of years living with disability is actually increasing. The second benefit is to change the health span and to help people live longer, to recapture lost ability, to get as fit as they were 10 years before, and to reduce the risk of the diseases people fear most, and reduce the risk of social care, which people are really nervous about now. The cost of social care and what it's like in social care. And we can also reduce the need for healthcare this winter. You see, let's just look at these 2 people here, these 2 men. One's kept reasonably fit and the other hasn't, the red line. So along comes chest infection. Now, chest infection affects us all, and I get it once a year from my chest, which I acquired before the Clean Air Act in 1956. But if you keep yourself fit, you can bounce back fairly well. Resilience. But look at what happens to the chap who is not kept fit. He's much more affected by chest infections and has to be admitted to hospital, and much slower to recover, and may not recover at all because of what's called the deconditioning syndrome. So we can change the pattern of healthcare from the top to the bottom. So how are we going to do this? How do we achieve the objectives? The first approach, which you're doing very well already, I know, is to develop a network. This is the century of the system and the network. Or to be more precise, a whole set of networks. And primary care networks, even called that, are a very important part of this reorganisation of the health service. Now, these networks have a very important part to play. That their job is to lead a cultural revolution. They're leadership organisations. And the leadership organisation works in a number of different ways. We need to develop a new language. We need to offer people education and learning, members of the public. And we have a learning programme for everyone over 55. And we should link it with employers starting at the age of 55 when they're starting to think about their pension. So we need to think about a shift in culture, a move from care to enabling. Now, to do this, we need to think in a different way. We need to think digitally. And instead of thinking of the health service as primary and secondary care, we need to think of it as self-care as the most important type of care. Self-care, informal care from the community and from family, primary care and specialist care. A Venn diagram with self-care, the most important type of care that you can receive for prevention and for living with a long-term condition. You see, the NHS its job is really to diagnose disease, to treat you acutely ill, to start the right treatment, put in a stent in my case, or start the right chemotherapy. But after that, you're on your own 99.9% of the time. Now, what we're doing, and what we'd very much like to involve you in, is developing a digital therapeutic community. Now, there are, of course, many people not online, but if you look at online, 90% of people 55 to 64, 85% of people 64 to 75, and over 60% of people over 75 are online. So let's give them the knowledge, the opportunities, both from the local social prescribing database, but also all the things that are available. And I know of several services which I'm involved in starting up. These are services like Goldster, which is I've been involved in starting this, which is a health service offering physical, cognitive and emotional activity. Health services provided by the big charities. These are all available. And using a special technology called Wish, we can produce this automatically from the GP record. The GP record knows your name, address, postcode, diagnosis, treatment. So without the GP having to remember to press a button or having to remember which fitness centres have a specialist in type 2 diabetes working with them, this doesn't need to happen. We can do this automatically. Produce activity prescriptions. So, to summarise, we need your network to deliver locally and to bring together all the agencies locally. But we're also developing a digital therapeutic community. And people who are online, people who are using Amazon and the bank, they have got the ability to use the knowledge, leaving the NHS free to support the people who are not online and who are affected by deprivation. So, it's terrific what's been done. You're doing really good work, I know. But what we're offering is the opportunity to think in a different way. Think not only of networks, but think also of a digital therapeutic community.